Hey guys, welcome back to the Deal Finders podcast. I'm here with a really good friend, Warren Basemore, and this is going to be an interesting podcast for you real estate focused people because Warren doesn't really buy real estate unless, or even deal with real estate unless it's attached to a business. So we're going to dive into that, see what it looks like, and maybe see if there's something that you new investors, you new people looking for deals, there might be a little niche here because he deals with a lot of businesses that need real estate or businesses that come with real estate and they don't want it. So there's a lot of that in there. So we're going to dive into that. So y'all buckle up. Make sure you go like and subscribe. We're on YouTube and Spotify, all the places you can listen and watch podcasts. So let's jump in. Warren, thanks for being here, buddy.
Yeah, man.
Real quick, if you could tell everybody kind of who you are, where you are, and what do you do?
Yeah, so Warren Basemore, I'm the vice president with Sunbelt Business Brokers, and we help folks buy and sell small businesses. And that is generally the unifying part of our deals is that it's an owner-operator most of the time.
Okay.
There's not a lot of passive business ownership at our size, which are generally businesses that are going to be doing $15 million in sales or less. And most of the time what makes that work is an active operator.
Right.
To varying levels. But yeah, so that's what we do. We confidentially market and sell businesses. If we do our job right, the public shouldn't be able to know that a business is for sale because we don't want customers or competitors or vendors to know that
or
a business or employees. We had that very situation come up this week with a deal that's supposed to close March 5th, a larger transaction, and one of the managers found out.
Yeah.
Walked in the door, gave us 2 weeks.
Oh.
I think we, with duct tape and baling wire, put that back together.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that we try our best to keep it confidential and, find a deal that works for buyer and seller alike.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I wanted you here on our Deal Finders podcast because we have very similar clients and very similar processes. We kind of talk about that a lot, where you are helping a seller sell something a non-traditional way. So where it's most business, a lot of businesses don't even sell,
right?
And especially in your niche,
size,
your
right?
Size business, they never even sell. They just stop operating one
Right,
day.
they just close up.
And your sales process, I imagine, and you fill me in, is a lot of education on to those sellers. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. On both sides.
Yeah.
So one thing that is unique in our business, because the only comparable that people have to what I do is real estate.
Yeah.
Folks are, to whatever level, accustomed to the real estate process. They're accustomed to getting a bank loan for a home, the appraisal process, the comps, a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, what's the price per square foot, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
In our world, and I've got a agent if I'm the buyer, you've got an agent if you're the seller,
right?
And we never really meet, we never really talk to each other, except maybe at closing,
Yeah.
or unless it's a non-traditional route. And in our world, generally I'm the only broker involved, and I'm generally working for the seller because that's who has cash at closing to pay me,
right,
for it.
Yeah.
But really, the truest sense of the word, and this is where the education piece comes in, is that I'm working for the deal. Yeah. And in our world, if a deal doesn't work for a buyer, they're not going to buy it. Right. And if a deal doesn't work for the seller, it's too valuable to them, they're not going to sell it. So education is a huge piece of it. What is the business worth? On the seller side, their questions are, how do I do this confidentially?
Yeah.
How do you find a buyer for a business? What is it worth? How do I know what it's worth? And then on the buyer side, because for sellers, this is most often the first time they've ever sold a business.
Right.
On buyers, the same is true. It's generally the first time they've ever bought a business, unless we're dealing with a private equity group or investors that have done this multiple times, but as a rule, if I'm coming to you and I'm buying your business, it's probably my first time doing it.
Yeah.
And so they don't know, how do you value a small business? If it's a good business, why is he selling it?
Yeah.
You know,
You get that all the time.
absolutely.
Yeah, but
and,
houses, yeah.
and that's true. So that education component for buyers, the other piece of it in our world that is you have to translate, small business financials are not incentivized to show the cash flow of that business. The only financials you have are P&L statements and tax returns that are created to show as little profit as possible for tax purposes.
Man,
so,
so all of you real estate deal finders out there are wondering why we have a business broker on here. All that he just said, like, we literally do the same thing.
Yeah.
So we're trying to sell some rental real estate that we've had for 8 years or something like that, and it's that time, right?
Right.
And our agent keeps saying, hey, they want P&Ls and tax returns. I'm like, it's not going to look good.
Right.
But that's on purpose. That's why we
right.
invest in real estate, right?
That's right.
We use tax strategies to make it, so we hopefully don't have to pay taxes. We, pay what we're supposed to pay.
Right.
But also, real estate is set up that way. So it's business. Small business
Right.
is set up that way. So a lot of that's exactly the same. The other thing that you mentioned that's very similar to what we do is, as deal finders, is we are looking to solve problems for sellers and find the solution that they didn't know exists. So,
Right.
so much of that is education and explaining. You said, well, how does this process work? Well, we have to explain that. Well,
Right.
What's my house worth? A lot of people that we deal with, this is either their first house they've sold and they don't really know what to do, or it's their 100th and they know what they want to do, and they know that going the traditional route sucks. So
Right.
They know that they're going to have to blast it, and all their friends will know. So they ask, well, how do we do this without putting it on the market where everybody sees what my business?
Right.
So this is very, very similar. Way more similar. What's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Similarities
Yeah.
than what I originally thought. I just know that we have similar discussions
Right.
about deals, so this is why.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
How often, and with the market changing and interest rates going up, how often do you all deal with seller financing?
That's a great question, because you just walked in on the tail end of our meeting that was a 30-minute meeting on seller financing.
Oh, I didn't. I really
you were
didn't
paying
hear.
attention.
Right.
I know. But you came and we were finishing up. We're wrapping up where seller financing is so important these days, where most sellers and most buyers don't have any clue what that means,
Right.
or how to do it. And so we were just going through a document that it answers a lot of questions, spells it out real clear. When lawyers get involved, and this, the wording is so obscure and scary. It's hard to convince someone that this is actually a good deal because they don't understand. And so that's what we were going through. What about you?
Yeah. So the typical financing route for if it's a small business acquisition, and 90% of our deals don't have real estate. 10% do.
Okay.
So the common deal for me, and let's use round numbers because I went to Irmo and USC. So a business sells for $1 million, right? That's the purchase price. And you go to the bank. A small SBA loan is typically the loan vehicle that a bank is going to use because there's a big guarantee from the SBA to the bank, so it's mitigating their risk.
Yep.
Typically, that deal looks like the bank will do 80% loan to value, 10% is the buyer's down payment, and 10% is seller financing in second position behind the bank.
Right.
So even in our bank loans, there is a component of seller financing. Because what the SBA has learned is what we've known for years in the business brokerage world, which is if the seller is invested in the deal, the likelihood that it's a fair deal and a deal that the buyer can stand up underneath, it goes way up.
Yeah.
And that's why in our world, so early in the process, the buyer and the seller have to meet. And they've got to get to know each other. You know this, we've had this discussion. The first thing I want a buyer to do when they call me, if they're interested in the business, after they sign a non-disclosure, after we talk about what they're looking for, if it makes sense, the next step is for them to meet the seller. Because A, nobody knows more about that business than the seller.
Right.
And B, at some point, that buyer and seller relationship is going to have to be strong enough that the buyer is going to take some leap of faith, because the financials aren't going to tell you everything you need to know on the front end. They're just not. Yeah. They can't. They're not designed. You're asking them to hold a weight that they're not designed to hold.
Yeah.
And the seller is probably going to have to finance at least a portion of that deal to the buyer. And so they've got to know them. How do I know, Andrew, if I'm financing this piece of the deal to you, how do I know that you could, well, you wouldn't finance it to anybody, but you met Andrew. You met his wife. Yeah. You know their story. You know where their kids go to school. You know, so when it humanizes it, we think of deals in our world so often, we think of them as math problems in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And they're not. They're human. They are human problems that we're working to solve. The reason a seller is selling a business generally has nothing to do with the business.
Yeah.
And it generally has everything to do with that seller. And a buyer is going, I want to own something that I can grow, that can take care of me and my family. I want to be my own boss. That's great. But how do I know that it's worth? How do I know that I'm not overpaying for it? How do I know that I can make a living doing it? And so that is the education piece that we really double down on. And I'm a huge proponent of seller financing in that is the security blanket for a buyer. It's the buyer's belief that if the seller's putting their money where their mouth is, I should be able to make this work.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. There's one thing I have to hit on and make sure everybody, if you're watching or listening to this, rewind and go back through it again. Take notes on what you just said, whereas it's not the business. The seller is selling because of the seller, not the business. That these transactions are not math problems to be solved. It is a people business. It's a people transaction and process. And part of that meeting that you were coming in at the end of it was our whole team talking about sales. Like, how do we improve our sales process in a people business? We are providing a service. We are buying properties from sellers that find traditional real estate unattractive for whatever reason. Traditional real estate sales unattractive, and so it's for them. It's for the people, and it's not for the calculators to figure out how the math works. Yeah, it has to pencil out, or we wouldn't be talking to the people. And so it's so important, and especially in today's world, that you are connecting people first to get deals done. And I love that you bring in sellers and buyers together so early on. Now we're home buyers, like we buy the house, so we are connecting and we're building rapport from the very beginning with our sellers. And what that does is that provides confidence and faith and trust that we're going to actually close a deal versus over the phone, virtual. And so we feel like as a local home buyer, we have a leg up on people that never make the connection. Well,
and two things that I want to add that you made me think of. The first is, in our experience, and I would assume this is the same with your when you're buying houses from folks.
Yeah.
There is a financial goal. That does not mean that is the only goal. Right. So I sold a Mako franchise, car body repair and painting.
Yeah.
And the reason that seller was selling was because their son had just accepted a scholarship to play college baseball. And he had been his son's coach all through his grown-up life. And he said, if I'm running this business, I can't go see his games. I want to travel to all the games.
Wow.
So that was his goal. He didn't want to walk away from the business.
Yeah.
He didn't want to give it away. He knew there was a value.
Yeah.
But he had made good money living in that business for the 20 years previous that he owned it. He wanted to be able to sell it, have a nest egg there on top of whatever he had put away, but he really wanted to free up his time to be able to go see his son. And that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and he knew if I didn't do it now, I'm not going to get to do it again. So those are the things for me that when I'm talking to a seller, I want to know not just your price.
Right.
But what's your if that's what I call a real seller. There's a difference to be between if you bring me a stack of gold bars, I will sell the business. Or I found out that my husband has cancer.
Yeah.
Those are hard conversations, but those to me wind up being real sellers. If I walk into this business one more day, we'll put my head through a wall. Well, that's a real reason to sell.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So if we could solve that problem, like I said, the money will most often work itself out.
Yeah.
Or the deal doesn't even get to the table. But that's if we could solve that other need on top of, I generally see the human need drive the financial piece more than the other way around.
Absolutely. And I think as deal finders, whether it's a business or a piece of property, we have to keep that in the forefront. Like we do ask, why are you selling today? We could sell the house that you live in, the house that you've had for 30 years. You could have sold it every day prior to today.
Right.
And that is or every day after today. So that's one of the very first questions we ask is, why are we talking about buying it today? Why have you decided to sell it today? Because, like you said, that problem is what we need to solve. Mm-hmm. And generally in real estate, that problem is the property itself.
Right.
Or it's a financial problem that the equity in the property solves.
Right.
And
so to piggyback on that too, our best friend in our deals, when a seller is unreasonable on their price.
Right.
Like say I've got interest in this business, but everybody that talks to me about it says he's asking too much, he's asking too much, he's asking too much.
Yeah.
Well, that means they're a seller. Every seller's asking too much. That's
fine.
Yeah. Our best friend in coming to a price that the market's going to support is just time.
Yeah.
It's my father-in-law that started Sunbelt 45 years ago, his joke is we let the market tell people that they've got ugly children.
Yeah.
He goes, nobody's baby is ugly. They're your baby.
They're your baby.
They're beautiful. Yeah. But the market is the one that says, I know you think that it's worth $800,000.
Yep.
I'll buy it from you. But I'll buy it from you for $600.
Yep.
And I'll put $250 down and I'm going to ask you to carry the note. Other piece that we've seen with interest rates go up is we have seen more deals switch from asset sales to stock sales to take advantage of in-place debt or in-place financing. And so one thing that business brokerage has taught me that I would imagine is true in your world as well, things that appear to be problematic in a business or in a deal can often actually be the thing that gets a deal done.
Right.
So if somebody is upside down, if they owe a tax bill, if they, whatever it is, those are things, the only way they're going to solve that problem is by selling it.
Yep.
And we can help them do that.
Yep.
It might not be for the number that they want. It might not be for the number that solves that problem and buys them a new car.
Yeah.
But it solves that problem.
But it solves that problem.
And so that's
those
items to me are the things that I look for along the way that generally nobody discloses to you at the first meeting.
Yeah.
It's just you've got to start the process, and along the way you find out, oh wow, there's this note that they owe that they're not that they're behind on, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, well this sale can solve that. Let's figure out how to make that work.
I love that because that is again very similar where we are almost always up against here's the solution we provided for your problem.
Right.
And no, it doesn't give you a Lamborghini on top of it.
Right.
But it gets it done and it gets it done now.
Right.
And that is appealing, but it gets way more appealing as the deadline approaches of the tax sale, the foreclosure, the medical bill, whatever the thing is that's prompted the sell today, right? That time, and again, when I think about people putting properties on the MLS, the market tells them your children are just ugly.
They're not as cute as you think they are.
Not as cute as you think they are. Yes, we would love whenever I talk to sellers, or our team talks to sellers, they say, I want to sell it for $250, right? And I'm like, I'd love to give you $250. I'd love to give everybody exactly what they want. But unfortunately, the market determines value, and we have to work on, what the value is determined by, comp sales and stuff like that. So it's not me saying your children are ugly. It's everyone else said that your children are in the neighborhood. They're just not as pretty as you think.
Or, maybe a more apt analogy is, not everybody's going to be a cleanup hitter on the baseball team.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm speaking from personal experience there.
You weren't.
No. I was the leadoff hitter because it's a small strike zone.
That's right.
When you're my size.
You usually get walked on that.
That's
first
it.
go round.
That's it.
Yep.
So I do think that our national conference for business brokers, the IBBA, one course every year is about leveraging in-place debt to get deals done. And I just think another example, and I know this is probably, I've got to believe this is true for you. When I was growing up, I thought that whatever the bank told you the first time was the gospel truth, and there's no changing it.
Yeah.
We right now have in South Carolina, we have a marina for sale, and the bank is foreclosing on it, and it's the seller owes $400,000 to the bank.
Yeah.
Well, we're still at market, asking $600 for it. Real estate's not involved. It's owned by the real estate's owned by another group. I say all that to say, the bank is saying we're foreclosing. We're still showing it to buyers.
Yeah.
Because what I know is the bank can say that, but the only thing that really solves that bank's problem
is sold.
It's sold. And I was amazed a couple years into this business going, wait, the bank can change their mind?
Yeah.
I didn't think the bank could ever change their mind. And so it's, for us, that's kind of it's the same with banks, it's the same with sellers. What they come in wanting and expecting is what they come in wanting and expecting. That does not mean that that's where it's going to wind up or what the deal is going to look like.
Yeah, I would. I just have to highlight this, and guys, I hope you're taking notes if you're listening to this and watching this. That there's a lot of nuggets for business buyers, home buyers, a lot of synergies there, and you may find that seller, that small business seller that has a piece of property, and he's selling that along with the business, or he's selling just the property because he doesn't need it anymore. These are particular people with similar situations, like all of our sellers, but a lot of them don't even know that they can sell their business. So I want to make sure that we highlight that. But before we go, you mentioned the sellers carrying the notes, seller financing, or using existing debt. And all of our real estate people, if you're listening to this podcast before, you know that we talk about that, which is owner financing is the term we use, but then also subject to. So taking a property over subject to the current mortgage staying in place.
Right.
So we do the exact same thing. Banks can't allow that. Banks can say, oh yeah, we totally agree. They let you assume it all on paper, all done. Or banks can say, you know what, we don't really like subject to, and it's still legal to do it. There's attorneys that can do it, but the bank might say, you know, we don't like that you did this. We want you to go ahead and cash that out, pay us back. You know, so there's things that you have to do and be aware of, but it's all the same.
Yeah.
We are just trying to solve a problem, and solving these problems, I would say everybody that calls us, they need the problem solved a little bit different than the normal way.
Right.
And that's probably exactly what you run into.
Absolutely. I mean, on our end, the majority of barriers that we face to getting a listing. So that's our inventory, right? If we've got listings, we're probably going to make a living that year. If we don't have listings, we're going to have a hard year.
Yeah.
You know, eat once a quarter.
Yeah.
But when we take those listings, the overwhelming majority of my job is to hear what are the things that are going to solve their issue. And from buyers, it really does start from our end. The buyers want to know that they can make a living out of this business. If I bought the business, what could I make?
Yep.
That's what they want to know. And our ability to be able to convey accurately and honestly in a way that is trusted by both buyer and seller, so that they both trust me in the transaction and know that I'm trying to play all cards on top of the table, so that at the end of the deal, if a seller feels like they let it go for a little bit less than they should have, and a buyer feels like they stretched more than they ought to have, that's generally how we know we did our job.
Yes, perfect. I love that. So we'll wrap it up here. This has been a really fun podcast. Again, we do these conversations a lot. I love talking to you about your business and kind of how it's very similar, and how we want to buy more businesses and potentially sell businesses as well. But how can people get a hold of you, and who should get a hold of you? Like who should reach out?
So both buyers and sellers, for me, if you know somebody that has a business that says, hey, it's probably time to retire, or do something different. That's our bread and butter. And then buyers, folks that are going, I've worked for a business. I think the motivation is often very similar to real estate investing, where you go, I've worked for somebody else all my life, and I'm ready to do something that I control. Our joke is you can't sell your job.
That's true.
So if you buy a business, generally you've got a job for life. You're not going to fire yourself, and you've got something that you can grow over time and add value to, and then when you're ready to retire, you've got an asset you can sell, or you've got something you can pass on to your kids. Very similar to a piece of real estate. You can grow it, you can improve it, and then when it's time for you to move on to the next chapter, you can either sell it, or if it's an income generating property, it might be the springboard for your kids or grandkids or whatever. But so for us, you can find us at sunbeltnetwork.com is our national site. We've got 300 offices in 40 states. I run the Charleston, Myrtle Beach, and Hilton Head offices, but I live in Columbia. W. Basemore at Sunbelt Network is my email. That's the easiest way to get me. And happy to have any conversation with buyers or sellers. Just questions. Ours is a long sales cycle, which isn't the most exciting part of my job.
What's that typically for a $5 million revenue business? Sales cycles, 9 months probably? That's a pretty good... 9 months to a year is pretty... If we can sell it, it'll generally sell in that time, and it'll generally take that long. If bank financing is involved, it's going to add 3 months to the deal, whether we want it to or not. I say whether we want it to. We would never want it to. Never want it to add time.
Right, but it does. So, a year. I have, right now, one of my listings is someone that took my name and number down 3 years ago. And they just listed now. So our cycle is, because it is such a, I can't talk you into selling your business. I don't want to. I love that I can't. When the time's right, I'll give you a call. And so for us, it can be 5 years, 2 years, a year of having conversations with owners that when it is the right time, we're who they think of.
I love it. All right, y'all. So we're going to cut it short. We might have to have Warren back here to do this all again, because this was a lot of fun. Yes, local here in Columbia. And guys, again, this is Deal Finders Club. This is our Deal Finders podcast, where we want to bring you all some actionable steps to get started, find your first, second, or third deal in real estate, and maybe even business, right? So I hope that this was helpful for you, taking away the techniques, the tips and tricks of how to talk to sellers, because it's very similar between businesses and personal property, or homes, personal homes, and that sort of thing. So, y'all, if you need anything, reach out. We're at dealfindersclub.com. You can find my contact info there. We have a resources page as well with YouTube links, and all this kind of great stuff is out there for you. So, if you need anything, let us know. Until next time, we'll see you at our next live local event in Columbia, South Carolina. See you there.
Thanks for listening to the REI Deal Finders podcast. You can find out more and apply to be a part of the REI Deal Finder community at reidealfinders.club.